Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Michler. I am the host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. Welcome here. Welcome back. This is another edition of our Ask Me Anything. And as with the trend for the last month or two, it's either me or Kip writing solo because both of us have been busy. We have things going on. So we've had to divide and conquer. So once again, you're just going to hear from me today. And I'm fielding the remaining questions from our Facebook group, which you can find at facebook.com/group/Order of Man. Over, I believe, 76,000 men inside of that Facebook group, all sharing insights, ideas, resources, etc., to help us become more improved versions of ourselves as men. Also, make sure you check out the Battle Ready program, a free course available to you that's going to walk you through the ins and outs of creating a framework for success on any front. You can check that out at orderofman.com/battle ready. All right, guys, without further ado, because you know what these Ask Me Anythings are all about, here we are fielding your questions, and we'll go for about a half hour today, maybe give or take a half hour. So we're going to start with Ben Phelps. First question. He says, how do you personally look at risk versus reward? I know it varies from person to person as far as different risk and reward, but what is your standard level? Well, look, here's the thing. I don't know if there is a standard level. I don't know if there's a certain dollar amount, for example, that I'm willing to risk. But I tend to be a pretty intuitive person by nature. So I'm not going to get caught up in the details and the intricacies of risk versus reward. And I don't think, generally speaking, there's very much risk out there that I or anybody else can't recover from. I mean, one of the greatest risks I think you might be able to suggest that we've taken over the past couple of years is moving out here to Maine. But it's not like we couldn't recover from this if everything went exactly opposite of how we hoped for it to go. We would have maybe been cold for a couple of years and not real happy with the area. But outside of that, that's it. And then we would have been able to move home. Same thing with starting a business. You know, unless you're investing millions of dollars, which is probably not really all that necessary, then I don't think there is an investment that you can not necessarily recover from. But one thing I would encourage you to do is to check out James Altucher's new book called Skip the Line, because in it, he talks about the concept of 10,000 experiments versus 10,000 hour rule, which a lot of us have heard from. And the 10,000 experiments rule that he's coined and talked quite a bit about in the book is that you're going to try many experiments in your life, whether it's business, romance, getting fit, getting lean. You're going to try these experiments because they aren't going to put you in a whole lot of risk. They have very, very high upside potential and very low downside risk associated with them. So Order of Man podcast is a great example of that. You know, I started a podcast. I had an old desk I was recording behind in the basement of my home, an old computer, and a $60 or $70 microphone. And I hit record, published it. I probably spent $500. And it didn't take a whole lot of effort on my part to put that first podcast out there. That's a great example of an experiment. I did the same thing when we started the Iron Council. I said, hey guys, I'm putting together this program. It's going to be a 12-week course. We have 12 spots available. Here's the things we're going to be covering. And by the way, I didn't write the entire curriculum for 12 weeks. I wrote the first 2 weeks of curriculum when I launched it, because I didn't want to write 12 weeks worth of material without having enough guys in there to prove that they actually wanted to join and participate in this. So that was an experiment. And then we had the 12 guys sign up. We did the first 2 weeks. And while we were doing the first 2 weeks of curriculum and information, I was writing the next 2 weeks. So I was just staying 2 weeks ahead of it. Those are experiments. Now that's turned into the Iron Council, which is a great resource for men, 850 plus men from all over the planet, in holding each other accountable and the camaraderie and brotherhood that comes with that. And it's also been fairly lucrative for me and affords me the opportunity to explore different ideas and concepts with Order of Man. And then my lifestyle as well, putting the roof over our head, food on the table, experiences with our kids, et cetera, et cetera. So let's not think about it from like a risk perspective. Think about more as an experiment. And then also consider, and I heard this on Andy Frisella's podcast a couple of weeks ago. He talked about how Winners think about the risk of not doing something, right? So he says losers will think about, okay, well, if I do this, then I'm going to risk, my income and this relationship, and it's going to be a struggle. And he said winners, on the other hand, think, well, if I don't do this, then I'm always going to live this life of mediocrity and not being content and not being fulfilled and satisfied with my life. So is the greater risk in taking that step or in not taking it? And I would say more often than not, the risk is greater in not moving towards your goals, desires, and ambitions. All right. Number 2, this comes from Daniel Seth. He says, I currently have 2 daughters. My first son is due August 21st. Congratulations, Daniel. It's exciting. Ryan, I've heard you mention different rites of passages for your sons. What are some examples of those rites of passages? Look, I don't want to get too much into the specifics. I mean, we have things that we do. We do hike outs and challenging things. Part of our boat building process right now is a mini rite of passage. So I don't want to get specific on what it should be, because it's going to be different for every dynamic and every family and every person. But what I would say is that it's got to have some challenge in there. There has to be challenge, physical, mental, emotional challenge built into it. There has to be some sort of meaning and purpose and significance. So there needs to be conversations that are had, skills that need to be developed. And then there has to be some sort of recognition or acknowledgement of graduation or completion. So if you go into the Order of Man podcast archives, I've done quite a few on rites of passages. And if you want to know where they are, go to orderofman.com, type in the search bar, rite of passage, and you'll find those podcasts, you'll find those resources. But again, you have to have the 3 critical elements I just mentioned. It has to be challenging based on their level of maturity, physically, mentally, emotionally challenging. Number 2, there has to have meaning. It's not a camp out. Like, you're not just going on a camp out. Now, camping out might be involved, but there's more to it. Like, I'm going to teach you about the birds and the bees. Some of the conversations I've had with my boys is the protect, provide, preside conversation, what it means to be a man and what a man does and what he doesn't do. One of the first rites of passages I do when my sons turn 8, excuse me, is I've bought these little lion animals, these little plastic animals. You guys have seen them. You know what I'm talking about. So I'll buy a lion cub, and then I'll buy a full adult male figure, and I'll show them as an object lesson at 8 years old, because this isn't appropriate for an 8-year-old. Is I'll show them, here's the lion cub. This is you right now. And here's the male lion. Here's what you want to become. Well, besides anatomy and size and everything else and physical appearance, what is the difference between this little lion cub, you, and this full grown male who you want to become? And we go through and we talk about the protect, provide, preside framework. That's why I build those things out, because it helps me know what I need to be doing, but it also helps me explain and articulate that not only to you guys listening to the podcast, but also my children, so they can easily understand what it is we as men do. So again, the 3 are challenge, physical, mental, emotional, meaning. It's not just a fun weekend to hang out with dad. There's meaning to it. There's purpose. There's an objective. And then the third component is there's got to be an acknowledgement and recognition of completion. You might give a knife to your son. You might give a rifle. I've done both, rifle, knife. So there's something that acknowledges and honors the child for completing that portion of their training. But outside of that, if you want some more detail, rite of passage at orderofman.com. All right, let's go to Hunter. This is from Hunter Christie. Have you ever considered doing a father-daughter event like Legacy? And by the way, we have our Legacy event coming up. As of the release of this podcast, it may be sold out. There might be 1 or 2 spots left, maybe. If you're interested, this is for men and their boys between the ages of 8 to 15 on September 23rd through the 26th, 2021. You can find out more at orderofman.com/legacy. But Hunter says, have we considered doing a father-daughter event like the Legacy? That way our young girls can see their father isn't the only one who has strong bond with their daughters. That way they can also see that there are more good men out there like that in the world. I'm also a new father. I have a 6-month-old daughter, and as she gets older, How can I expose her to things like hunting, shooting, fishing, camping without compromising her femininity, since these are predominantly male hobbies? Yeah, I mean, they're not male hobbies because hobbies don't have a gender. They are hobbies that I would say are mostly done by males, but that doesn't mean that just because she likes to hunt or shoot or fish or camp is going to naturally strip her of her femininity. Use the word compromise. Hunting, you're going hunting with your daughter isn't going to compromise her femininity. Going shooting, fishing, camping, doing all these things isn't going to compromise her femininity, especially if her mother's involved, because ideally her mother is a feminine woman like my wife is. And so it's just not likely to happen just because you're taking her hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, etc. So I think that might be a concern that isn't really founded in reality and really isn't a concern I'd be worried about. As far as the father daughter event like legacy, yeah, I've considered it in the past, and you bring up some good points about uh, she can see modeling from other men. Logistically, it would have to change a little bit because obviously it's more appropriate for 40 men, 20 fathers with 20 sons to get together in an event like this than it would be for men and daughters. So logistically, it would have to change. And as of right now, I'm not really interested in going that route. A lot of guys will say, oh, do something for daughters. This is order of man. And I realize men have daughters too. I have a daughter as well. But my mission is focused on men and sons. So maybe there's something else out there like that already. Maybe we'll incorporate something like that down the road. But I really see my heavy emphasis being focused on how do we be men ourselves and how do we usher young men, in this instance, our sons, into manhood. And I know guys tell me all the time, well, daughters are important too. They are. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying I don't do things with my daughters, or my daughter, I should say. But my focus here with this movement and this mission is to focus on boys and men. And that's something that's going away, something predominantly and exclusive for boys and men. That may change for us down the road, but right now it is what it is. And I can be hyper focused on creating events that are going to resonate mostly with men and boys. All right. Arthur Allen, he says, what does it mean to you, Ryan, to be a man? Because I do ask this question quite a bit. Of course, we've been studying and pondering and reflecting and thinking and discussing on this question for, well, years now, 6 years now. And so every once in a while, somebody will ask me, well, what do I think it means to be a man? It's a very easy framework for me. I'm going to try to get through it as efficiently as possible because I've answered it quite a bit in the past, but it's an important one. Let's talk about the frameworks first of man, male, and masculinity, and we'll throw in manliness. So a man, what is a man? That's the question you're asking. Well, first and foremost, the prerequisite is that a man is a biological male. There's a lot of confusion about that in this day and age. Ryan, how could you be so insensitive? It has nothing to do with insensitivity. It has to do with biology. Okay. If a man isn't just what you want it to be, it isn't how you feel at the root of it. You have to be biologically male. Now, I know that there's probably a lot of women who listen to this. There's probably women who believe themselves to be men listening to this. This is my definition. It's not even my definition. It is the definition. But there's a game a lot of people like to play where they start to change the definitions of things in order to fit their ideology and their narrative and their worldview. We don't do that here. Okay. Man means something. And primarily, and again, as a base, it means that you're biologically male. That's first. Okay. Now we have masculinity. Masculinity is the set of characteristics, behaviors, virtues, thoughts, ideas, etc., actions that we would, as a society, generally attribute to men. And we do that for a reason. It isn't socially constructed, people. Okay. It is not. It's biologically constructed. And it's supported societally because it works. And up until the ease of modernity that we have currently, it hasn't been questioned. But men have created such an incredible world And that's not to say we are free of doing huge injustices to other people. We're not free of that. But we've done a tremendous job creating an environment of freedom and safety and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And because of that, now we have the luxury of questioning what even a man is. If we weren't in that boat, you would see more often firsthand what it actually means to be a man, because men would need to step up. On the back of Memorial Day several weeks ago, those are men. You didn't see women in large numbers storming the beaches of Normandy. Now, were there women there? Probably, serving in some sort of support role, medical role, something like that. So that's not to diminish the fact that women can be involved, and many of them may be capable of some of the same things. But generally and predominantly, you're going to see men in those roles. When there's a natural disaster, when there's a violent encounter, when there's an emergency situation, predominantly you're going to see males in that role. Are you telling me that's socially constructed? No, it's biologically constructed. And everybody generally agrees this seems to work pretty well. Men are bigger, we're stronger, we're faster, we're more capable of physical exertion of strength. So, got it. You're the protectors. Okay. So masculinity is the set of characteristics, behaviors, thoughts, ideas that we associate with being men. And it's based on biology, testosterone, other chemicals that we have running through our bodies, and other hormones. Then we have man and manliness. This is not to be confused with male. Okay, male is simply biology. That's all it is. It's the chromosomes. Okay, it's your biological makeup. You're male or you're female. Now, some guys will say, well, what about intersex people? That's a biological disorder. That's a medical disorder. That doesn't make those people less. That's not a personal indictment against who they are or how they can show up in the world and how they can perform. It's a physical disorder. It doesn't create a third sex. It doesn't mean that sex isn't binary. It just means there's an anomaly here that falls outside of female or male. Now, male is just biology. My sons, they're male. They're not men. I don't even expect them to be men. They're boys. They're males. So being a man is more than just your biological makeup. It's what you do with the chemicals that are running through your body, the testosterone and all the other chemicals that cause you to think and behave and act and believe the way that you do. Directing those and harnessing those for productive outcomes for you, for strangers potentially who can't do it for themselves, and for the people you care about. That is manliness. That is what it means to be a man. If you're taking who you are biologically and you're using it to create advantages and positive outcomes for you and people in your life, then you are acting like a man acts. And this is why manliness actually has less to do with age. I just told you about my sons. Now, we don't expect them to be men. We expect them to be boys, but they exhibit manly behavior. They exhibit both masculine behavior and manly behavior. And again, manly is using, and I did a podcast on this on a Friday Field Notes. You can go check it out. I think it was called Boys Break, Men Build, I think is what it was titled. So what does it mean to be a man? Biologically male. You have the hormones and the biological makeup that make you male. And then you're directing and channeling all of that to be a protector, a provider, presider. And that's what defines you as a man or makes you manly or lack thereof. All right. Maybe more than you're asking for. It's strange to me that I need to even talk about this. But again, we live in such an easy time in society and culture and life right now that these are the conversations we need to explain to people. Now, I'm not that old. I'm 40 years old. So when I was born 40 years ago and in the 80s, this wasn't something that we really needed to worry about. But in a few short years, 40 years, these are the conversations we're having. Wild stuff. All right. Let's go to David Pilgrim. He says this: what do you feel is the largest barrier to entry to become part of a band of brothers? I've been the ultimate example of a lone wolf for many decades. And now, after 54 years on this planet, I have started to work on that very thing. I've recently joined the Iron Council. Glad to have you there. And I'm seeing evidence of a bunch of guys and a great culture, a bunch of great guys and great culture. Hoping this experience will help me open some doors and break down some walls, which has taken me years to build. Here's what I would say is the greatest challenge is that, with few exception, you're going to have to be the one to initiate this. Because in my experience, too many men aren't willing to do it. You said it yourself. For 54 years, you've been a lone wolf. Well, why? Why has it taken you 54 years? You haven't shown the initiative to go out of your way to create your own band of brothers. And there might be a lot of reasons for this. Maybe it was fear, or maybe just a lack of desire, or that you had everything figured out, or at least you thought you did. And something has changed to cause you to open up and consider that maybe doing it with other men is better than going at it alone, doing this thing we call life. So if you feel that way, it's safe to assume that other men feel that way. And all of us are waiting around, hoping that there's going to be another guy who's going to call us up for a fight night, or invite us to the gym, or to mentor us and coach us and take us under their wing, or to teach us about building things or developing a new hobby. And we're waiting for somebody else to do it. Well, if everybody's sitting around waiting for the next guy to take some initiative, nobody's ever going to do it. But here's the opportunity. And this is why Order of Man even exists, because I acknowledged this early when I started Order of Man 6 years ago, that nobody else was willing to do it. And if I'm the guy who's willing to do it, then I get to create this incredibly powerful opportunity to rally men around some sort of commonality of trying to improve themselves as men. That creates opportunity for me, fulfillment, satisfaction, experiences, financial opportunities. It also helps me, or allows me, to create something that I want. I don't have to go into somebody else's world and say, well, I'm in your arena, I'm at you got home field advantage, and I just got to fit in. And in many cases that works, but I get to create it. And isn't that amazing? I get to create exactly what I want. Sometimes guys will ask, well, where does your inspiration come from? Or how did you, think about Order of Man and what you wanted to be and how you wanted to create it? I just am creating it for me. This is what I would have wanted 10 years ago or longer that I didn't have. So it's easy for me, guys will say, Ryan, man, it seems like you're talking directly to me. Well, I'm not necessarily talking directly to you. I'm actually talking to me. A lot of the things I post, for example, on social media, or the topics I have on this podcast, are the conversations I need to hear for myself so that I can improve and I can get better. And it probably resonates with you because we have very similar thoughts. Sure, we have some disagreements here and there, but we have very similar thoughts, which is why it feels like I'm talking to you, because you and I are very similar, probably. So the biggest barrier to entry is waiting for somebody else to do something, and then you trying to acknowledge what it is, and then feeling awkward out of place because you're not part of the club yet. It's the same way when you go to a new gym, or I felt this way. I've trained at a couple of different jiu-jitsu places, and the first day I went, I felt awkward. Second day, less awkward. Third day, even less awkward. And now I walk in and I don't feel awkward at all. Those are my friends. Those are my buddies. Those are the guys I get to know with. We suffer together towards a common good and common purpose. But as I said earlier, I acknowledged this and didn't view it as a barrier, but an opportunity to create what you're part of now, Order of Man. And what an amazing experience it's been. All right, let's go to. So I'm going to bring this question up here. It's going to be hard for me to answer. In fact, I'm probably not going to answer it, but I'm going to bring the question up here because I think there's an opportunity to learn here. This one comes from Craig. He says, any advice for stepdads? I've said it over and over. The quality of your life will be determined by the quality of questions that you ask. Now, your intention for asking it is probably great intentions. You want to be a great stepdad. I commend you for that. I honor you for wanting to do that. It's just not a great question because I don't know what to answer. Advice for how to raise your kids, advice for coaching them in sports, advice for disciplining, advice for talking with your wife, their mom. I don't know. So what I would suggest, guys, is when you ask questions, like ask them very specifically. So, Craig, maybe a better question, if this is what you're interested in, is saying, "Hey, Ryan, I've got my stepdaughter or my stepson, and they're getting a little mouthy, and I'm trying to figure out where the balance is and what my role is as their stepfather for disciplining. How would you go about doing that? Or what resources do you have?" That's a tighter question. That's something that somebody can answer. But any advice for stepdads? I mean, what I'm going to say is broad, but that's because the question is broad. Love them. Treat them like your child. They are your child. Honor their mother. Show them a good example of what a man is. Make sure you keep the lines of communication open with your wife so that you aren't mismanaging expectations of what your role is, what you want to do and what she may want you to do. They may not be in alignment, so you need to get in alignment, have those conversations. But outside of knowing exactly what you're looking for, a little harder for me to answer than broadly, be the man, be the dad. You got it. All right, here we go. Sean, Patrick, when do you know when to pivot? I've been advertising my business for around 2 months with no new leads. I know it takes time for things to happen, but nothing successful to learn from yet. How long before I change my approach and pivot to something different? So this is the best advice I can give you, because there isn't one moment like when this happens or when this doesn't happen, or if it's been 90 days, there's no answer for that. Here's what I would suggest. You need to find somebody, Sean, who is in your line of work, or at least in the same vein, maybe doing the same thing. And you need to ask them specifically what they're doing and how they're making it successful. Because if you've been in this thing, you said you've been doing this for 2 months now with no new leads, that could mean a couple of different things. It could mean that your strategy isn't working, or it could mean that it takes 3 months instead of 2 months. But guess what? We don't know. You don't know because you're ignorant about it. And I don't say that as judgmental. When I say ignorant, I'm saying you just don't know. How could you know? You've never done it before. So you need to find somebody who's qualified. So when I was in my financial planning practice, I was really struggling and I was about to throw in the towel. And I'm so stubborn and I didn't want to quit. So before I did, I said, okay, I got to figure something else out here. And I was so stubborn and arrogant that I didn't want to ask for help. But I got to the point where my humility was just shot because or not my humility, excuse me, my arrogance was shot. My ego was just crushed because I wasn't making this work. And I reached out to a couple of guys who were always producing in the office, in our financial planning office. And I said, hey, look, guys, I'm struggling, which I hated to admit. And I don't know how to do this. I'm watching you guys. You're on the call. You're making deals. You're getting new clients. You're getting referrals. Like, I don't know what you're doing and I don't know how to do it. Can you show me? And both of them said, yeah, sure, we'll show you. And so I started working with these guys and we would split cases. And initially I was a little hesitant because I had to give up commission. Well, 100% of zero is zero. 50% of what we were able to produce is significantly more than the zero, which was what I was producing. So I'd split cases with them. I partnered up with a couple of these guys and eventually, we went our own ways and I learned what I needed to learn and we split cases and we have a good relationship and we parted ways over time. Nothing bad. All of it was amicable. But the point I'm making here is that I went to the people who know exactly what they need to be doing. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? And they'd say, well, you need to ask for referrals. And I said, well, I'm doing that. And they said, well, okay, let me hear how you're doing that. And I would share that with them. They're like, okay, well, that's wrong. Let me show you a better way to do it. So, Sean, you're asking about advertising your business for around 2 months. It's so broad. I don't know exactly what you're doing for advertising, but I would find somebody who's using the same type of advertising or in a very similar market space and ask them what to expect. Ask them to critique what you're doing. Hire them to coach you through the process of making this a success. But don't just wing it and don't just guess, because it could just be that if you turn it off, that it was actually everything was going to turn on for you in a week from now if you just left it alone. But we don't know. So again, find qualified people, hire coaches, hire mentors. You hear me talk about it all the time. Hire people. I know it seems expensive, but again, this goes back to the risk thing earlier. It's risky. Like I have to pay this person. What if it doesn't work out? Yeah. What if you don't hire them and you stop doing things that were working because you didn't know and it just takes a little longer? What's the cost associated with that? So consider a mentor or coach, hiring those people. If you were to make a speech at a high school graduation, what would you talk about or say? I don't think I've ever been asked this question. This is from Chad Wallace. I've never even thought about that. Because by the time I was graduating high school, I was so jaded with it. I was just ready to be done. I was doing classes that I didn't feel were moving the needle. Sports was wrapping up, which was a big part of my life when I was younger. So I was bitter about that. You know, my mom was going through a divorce. And so I was contentious and bitter about that. So like, I mean, I had friends and I had a good time, but I don't remember it around graduation being like my favorite part of life. My son, the other day, we were driving and one of my boys asked me, when I was a kid, what did I do or something? I can't remember exactly what he said. And my oldest son said, Dad was never a kid. And he's actually not that far off. Like I've always felt older than maybe I really was. That's why I feel so confident and secure with where I am right now. I think I maybe came out of the womb like a 40-year-old. I don't know. Okay. But your question, what would I talk about at a high school graduation? I would talk about the adventures of life. I would talk about taking risk. I would talk about chasing and pursuing something that you're passionate about, that you're excited about, that interests you. I would also talk about dabbling, not for the sake of just dipping your toe in the water, but for the sake of trying a lot of different things, because you never know what path is going to lead you where. And so many people are so conditioned to follow one particular path. Maybe that's the path their teachers or their guidance counselor told them about. Maybe it's the path that their parents went down. And then there's all these other little opportunities and little side trails and scenic routes that could have actually been very good for you, but you weren't willing to take it because everybody told you to stay on this one path that's the tightest and the most groomed path that gets you exactly to where they think you want to go. And maybe you realize, I don't want to go down that path. I want to go over here. So I wish I would have done that a little more. I wish I would have traveled the world and taken a few more risks and tried a few more things and said yes to a few things that I normally wouldn't say yes to. And again, this goes back to me feeling like I've always been 40. I've always been a pretty responsible individual. I wish I would have been maybe a little bit more irresponsible, not reckless, but hey, yeah, next week you want to go to Germany? Cool. Let's go to Germany. Oh, there's an opportunity to go surfing. Well, I've never surfed. So yeah, I want to do that. And just go live life. Collect a bunch of experiences. Take a few more risks and just see where it takes you. Blaze your own path. Maybe there isn't a path for you. Maybe you have to create it. But that's on you to figure out. So I would talk about that. All right. How are we doing on time here? This one's going to be a fairly short one as well today, guys, because we're almost up on questions. Got a few more here that we'll take. All right. So this is a very hypothetical question. I'll see what we can do here. Paul Sinot or Sinot. Is there a protocol to follow when you have too many good options? Been headhunted by a few companies. All options look good, similar location, pay, etc. He took job B, but job C said they will hang on in case I don't like B. This makes me feel like I can't fail at B, but I feel like this is a bad scenario and could cloud my opinion. There's some other stuff here. Here's what I'm going to say. You took job B, so head down, get after it. Like, be the best at job B. Be the best you can absolutely be. And if you know what, you realize, I'm not digging this. I don't feel like there's potential. I don't feel like there's growth. I don't feel like there's mobility. I don't feel like I'm satisfied. I mean, you can always change to C or D, E, F, X, whatever. But the point I'm making here is that you made your choice. You made your bed. So lie in it, at least for a couple of nights. I mean, you can't really judge whether or not this is good or that's good if you've never really put your full heart and mind into what you're doing right now. So you're second guessing yourself because option C is on the table. This is actually one of those scenarios where I wouldn't say burn the boats. I would just say tuck them away somewhere where they aren't so visible and just go all in on job B right now and just allow that to develop and to play out and for you to get good at it. Because job C will be there. They told you it'll be there. And if that job C isn't available, there'll be another job C or D or E or F, or maybe it's not even a letter of the alphabet. Maybe you create something entirely new because you got good in job B and you developed 3 or 4 or 5 skills that translate perfectly into doing something you've never even considered before. But you got to go all in order to do that. So I'm not giving you a protocol. I'm just saying, give job B a chance. And don't worry about failing. Oh, I can't fail. You're not going to fail. Okay, you're playing not to lose right now. What if you played to win? You're playing defense. Play offense. Stop thinking about, oh, what if I fail? Yeah, well, maybe you will, and then you'll figure it out. And you probably will at some point. Maybe not in the job, but at some point, we're all going to fail. And if that's all we ever thought about, we'd be paralyzed, which sounds like maybe that's what's happening right now. So don't burn job C. Lock it up where you can't see it, you can't focus on it, and get after job B. Go all in, see where that takes you. And then we'll evaluate. We'll come back and we'll evaluate from there. Tad Kamimura, he says, are meat bags that are used in hunting basically extra strong trash bags? Interesting question. The answer is no, they're not trash bags, because the meat bags actually have different kinds of, antimicrobials or whatever you call it. I don't even know what you call them, but that keeps the meat clean and sanitized, and the bags breathe too. They should definitely breathe. And I don't think trash bags breathe, but I'm not a bag aficionado. So I don't know for sure. There's probably a hunter who could tell me here more. In fact, I have some hunting bags right over here on the side of my floor because I'm going hunting. But the way I understand it, the bags are treated and they breathe, which you want it to breathe. All right, we're going to take one more. Let me find a good one here. I need a copy of No More Mr. Nice Guy. Where can I get one? Where can I get a copy of a book? The bookstore, the library, Amazon, Google. Easy. Okay, here we go. This is from JC White Capinson. I don't know what that is. Okay, here we go. JC White Capinson. All right. If men share our struggles, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, we get told to suck it up, stop whining, being a pussy, etc. Actually, sometimes that is, so I'm interjecting my own thought here, and there's more to this. Sometimes that is the correct answer. Not always, but sometimes. So let's not pretend like that isn't maybe a viable solution at times. Not always. How are we supposed to feel failure inside or like we're crumbling? We stand strong, keep putting one foot in front of the other and make it all work. Though inside we tore up, depressed, full of doubt. Society likes to pretend it's okay to talk about it, share our feelings. But when we do, ridicule follows along with judgment. Another point, how does talking about it help? How does reliving moments that cause? Okay. All right. So here's the thing. Men communicate differently than women, right? And sometimes you being told to suck it up is exactly the right advice. It isn't actually intended to be an insult. I mean, in some cases, maybe, but I think more often than not, especially if you're with the right men, like I have men in my life who are like, yeah, man, that really sucks. But you know what? You gotta suck it up and you got to drive on. So what are you going to do about it? And that's actually exactly what I need to hear. I don't need them to put their arm around me and say, I feel so bad for you. And, oh, life's so hard. And, oh, are you going to be okay? And what can I do for you? I don't need that. What I need is for an outlet. You know, it's like my wife does canning. I've talked about this example before, and she puts these cans with the water in and she puts the lids on and she puts them in this big metal can, and it's got this little release valve on the top. And as the thing steams and cooks, that's what vacuum seals the cans together. But it has this little release valve that lets steam off, because if not, then the whole thing would just be overpressurized and quite literally blow up. Well, that's the same thing that's happening here. You need to be able to talk about these things. You need to be able to have actions and ideas and processes and systems in place to deal with it. Okay. But it's a release valve. It's not like I'm going to let all of the pressure out. You got to have some of that pressure. And sometimes having the right men in your corner who you know care about you, but can still say, suck it up, get tough, be a man, isn't always insulting. Sometimes it's good advice. So at the root of this is finding the right people who have been where you are and understanding that we're all full of doubt. We all get depressed. We're all tore up from time to time. We all get setbacks and struggles. Okay, what are you going to do about it? What actions are you going to take? What plan are you going to put in place? How are you going to get up out of bed when you feel like you don't want to? And that's what a man in your corner will help you with. Not by putting his arm around you and singing Kumbaya with you. That's not going to do anything. Okay, now the other point here is, how does reliving the moments that cause so much pain fix anything? Because you learn from them. When you start reliving those moments, as you say, you're vocalizing them, you're sharing them, you're contextualizing them, which actually gives you a more well-rounded, objective look at what's happening. Because if it just bounces around in your brain, it's an echo chamber in there. And you're going to feel slighted, or you're going to feel victimized. You're going to feel like other people are out to get you. You're going to feel tore up and not have an outlet for it. But reliving it allows you to put some context and meaning to it. And then you can start learning the lessons. You know, if you had a bad job performance review, or a relationship that went south, or a bankruptcy, or some sort of abuse in the past, reliving it, so to speak, by talking about it with other people who may have experienced it, allows you to put some meat on the bones so you know how to deal with it properly. Because sometimes we just can't deal with it properly on our own. That's actually one of the problems a lot of men have. And that's part of the problem with the lone wolf thing that somebody talked about earlier on this podcast. The older gentleman, I think he was, in his 50s or 60s, who said he's always been a lone wolf. Okay, well, this is part of the problem. You can't be the lone wolf. You have to have the outlet, because you need to be able to put some context and get some perspective around this stuff. So find good men in your corner and realize that some of that advice is actually good advice. Start thinking about these things that are happening so you can come up with better solutions moving forward. All right, guys. Good questions today. Great questions today. We're going to call it a wrap today, but appreciate you guys being on this path with me, asking these good and thoughtful questions. Hopefully I gave you some things to consider. Not always the best answers, I know, but hopefully you're considering new perspectives. We're going to continue to do this every week. It's been good. We always get good feedback when we do. In the meantime, make sure you leave that rating and review. Connect with us at the Battle Ready program, orderaman.com/battleready. What else? I think that's about it. Check out the Facebook group, connect with me on Instagram, all the things. Also check out the Iron Council, our exclusive brotherhood, orderaman.com/Iron Council. All right, guys, we'll be back later this week. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.